Now, without further delay, I'd like to turn today's call over to your first speaker, Barbara Rotondo. Barbara, you have the floor.
Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're here to hear from Banner Health and how they demonstrated quantified risk reduction using ServiceNow. Myself, I'm Barbara Rotondo. I'm with ServiceNow. And joining me today is Greg Liebergen from Banner Health. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning, Barbara.
As well as Brian Risman from Edgile.
Good morning.
And David Decter from Edgile as well.
Good morning, Barbara.
Today, if we take a look at the agenda, we're going to hear from Greg on the art of the possible, how they leveraged ServiceNow's GRC solution to help with risk reduction and visibility into their investments. And then we'll learn a little bit more about the actual journey that they took on. And then we'll hear from Edgile, a trusted strategic partner for GRC implementation, on some strategic and tactical methods in considering implementing GRC solutions. And then finally, we'll hear from you any questions that you may have. So to start off, I'd like to ask Greg, I know that you've done a lot of things in your environment around GRC, and in fact, I'm to understand that your board stated that they now understand where your GRC investments have been going and how you've been able to close that risk gap. I'm sure this isn't always the case when it comes to boards and IT expenditures.
Yeah, Barbara, so we have a great team here at Banner, and they've all helped us get to where we are today with our GRC and demonstrating our risk posture with the board. So I think it's important to thank them and call out what they've helped us achieve. Specific to the board, one of our early wins was actually building our risk register into the ServiceNow GRC, and that allowed us to really integrate our risk and compliance management. It ticks and ties over 100 of our laws and regulations that Banner has to comply with, as well as some of the frameworks that we want to abide by and make sure that we're keeping our eye on. But it's also providing us with that robust risk management framework. We're able to talk about inherent and residual risk ratings, and we're able to detail out those items for the board so they can really understand it. It takes it and it rolls it up into 6 different risk categories that make sense and talk to the board level. Historically, we had been qualitatively talking about risk, and it wasn't it registered with the board, but it wasn't what they were looking for. And so we were able to take that and move from the high, medium, low, red, amber, green type of risk, and using the Edgile IGRC content as well as ServiceNow, we were able to take that and transform it into qualitative risk, numbers to back up that data, to really show where we moved from and how that reduced our overall risk posture. That helped the board to understand where investments were being made and how those investments were paying off. But additionally, it helped us understand internally where we needed to continue investing to reduce risk.
Wow. Can you tell us a little bit about your current environment?
Absolutely. So Banner is made up of 28 hospitals across 6 different states. We have our Banner Health Network. We have our Banner Medical Groups, numerous outpatient surgery centers, rehab. We do the whole gamut. So we are a very large organization. We're serving a lot of patients. Obviously, we have a complex environment. We've gone through the M&As. We've worked through joint ventures. Our GRC environment today, it's centered around the ServiceNow solutions. So our governance and compliance modules, the risk audit module for our information security control testing, and as well as the vendor risk portion for our third-party risk management. After we've moved into the ServiceNow and transformed the way we work and manage our risk, we're able to harmonize our library of our laws, our regulations, our industry mandates, and it serves as the foundation of our program and what we're doing and how we're managing our risk. So we can link our risks with the laws, apply them to our operating environment, rate our inherent and residual risk, and it's all captured in our risk register. We have an executive dashboard that the audit it produces specific reports depending upon the audience that we're sharing the data with, and it really gives us kind of that clear path forward for what we need to do to reduce risk. But we've also now been able to create out what is that 18-month roadmap of what we're going to be continue building within the GRC module.
What actually prompted you to begin the journey? And maybe you can share with us what your environment looked like before.
Sure. Previously we were working in disparate tools. I think spreadsheets, SharePoint sites, survey forms, etc. It's kind of the standard. We've all been there. We all don't want to be there. And we knew that we had to do something about it. We were much more reactive than we were able to be proactive, and that was definitely one of the big triggers that we needed, was shifting that focus. We had teams that were performing overlapping activities in spreadsheets. The great story of everyone's working offline in a non-collaborative mode, and it wasn't working when you've got two team members focused on the same task rather than being able to be more productive throughout the day. So our leadership team knew that we needed to improve our efficiency. We needed to reduce our costs. We needed to speed up the time to market. And, really, we needed to reduce our organization. And not only that, but we needed to be able to quantify it to our various stakeholder groups.
Great. It sounds like you've really transformed. How were you able to prioritize what to work on?
It's a great question. So we started off kind of building with that strategy and roadmap piece. And to do that, we met with numerous stakeholders from across various different parts of Banner and got their input to understand their needs. We own the GRC within information security, but we wanted to allow other teams to leverage the technologies that we had to really enable their business processes and requirements as well. So we had great support internally within our information security team. We also had other teams that came on board. I'm thinking along the lines of our compliance team, our legal team, our privacy team, our central payments office who manages our PCI compliance. It was great across the board, just being able to talk to them, understand their needs, determine where we had overlap, and how we could use the same tool to accomplish either the same or similar tasks. We really had a mindset of thoughtful risk reduction, and we were using that to enable our new capabilities rather, that helped us prioritize with Edgile where we were going to get the biggest bang for our buck and how we were going to really reduce risk in the quickest way. Obviously we talked a bit about the risk register earlier, and that was one of the areas that we started with right away. From a leadership perspective, we had a mandate that we should be shifting as many things as we could into our ServiceNow platform, and it maximized the value that we were getting from our IT service management as well as our security operations investment, and it brought everything together and allowed us to leverage data from different parts of the organization to drive that risk reduction and quantification.
Oh, thank you. It's interesting you talk about ServiceNow and perhaps moving more onto ServiceNow. And while I love to hear that, I'm curious why Banner was deciding to embark on that initiative.
Yeah, our leadership had a pretty clear vision, and it was to use a common platform driven from a service-oriented mindset that enabled accountability, consistency, and high quality. And that was, that came from our top, C-suite level team. The direction is basically whatever made sense to move to ServiceNow to do it so that we could maximize the efficiency of that single data repository, the common interface that everyone's used to, and really just take advantage of an investment that we had made already.
Thank you. You mentioned previously that you had some different tools or disparate tools that you had phased out. How did you go about doing that?
Well, it was a pretty easy path to figuring out what needed to go. So, a lot of things were being managed, as I said, in spreadsheets and SharePoint sites, survey forms, email, phone calls, etc. And there wasn't a great way of documenting what we were doing and how different team members were working with the data. Even to this day, we still have to look historically back to try to find some of those materials before we were live within ServiceNow. And so, taking all of those materials and shifting it into a platform that allowed us to maintain data, to see the audit trails of who did what when, and really just continue referencing it while putting that data continuously in the customer's hand, it was a no-brainer for us to shift from the spreadsheets, email, phone calls into an ongoing platform.
And what did you identify as quick win areas? What solutions are up and running, and what does that really mean for Banner Health?
Yeah, so we launched with 3 areas initially. So besides our strategy and roadmap, that was kind of the foundation to the work that we did. But then we moved forward with configuring our risk register, our IT controls, and our third-party risk management. So the risk register was tremendous value right away. It basically operational aspects for the team, understanding inherent and residual risk, but also, as we talked about earlier, being able to report that to the board and other stakeholder groups. We leveraged Edgile's IGRC content and their risk methodology accelerators. That allowed us to kind of tick and tie the laws and regulations to our various different risks that we needed to track and report on. And it really enabled an integrated risk and compliance foundation for our program. Having both the quantitative and qualitative risk data really helped us get the mind share on what we needed to do next.
And I imagine along the way there were a lot of lessons learned, right? Can you share with us any surprises, either pleasant or otherwise, that you observed and how you tackled them?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we leveraged the audit module within the IT governance rather creatively. So specifically, we were using ServiceNow to automate the management of our playbooks and continuous monitoring for our IT teams, and that's in relation to our IT general controls, working with our external auditors and internal audit teams. Now we have a proactive, positive assurance that helps change the tone of our conversation that we're having with these various different groups. So in the many years of doing this, we found that people always want to do the right thing. They may just not know what that right thing is or how to do it. And, we are able to provide that clarity by automating some of these tasks and helping them understand what it is that we really want them to do.
And how did ServiceNow help enable the quick wins and add value for Banner?
Yeah, so ServiceNow is actually one of our core applications at Banner. Our entire workforce knows how to use it. They're trained with it. They're familiar with the user interface. When we launched the platform, adoption was pretty much instantaneous. What really sticks out was the ability to get the board-level visibility through our risk register, as well as our roadmap to mature towards our KPI and KRI integration within the platform to do our control testing and the various other activities that we do on a regular basis. Right now, we're in the process of rolling out the regulatory change management solution, and we're working with Edgile on that so that we're able to take new laws and regulations, build workflows so that we're able to kind of push those out, make sure that people are aware of them, work with control owners to update our specific controls across our applications and systems, and then make sure that we have those, that we're able to attest that those new controls are in place and that we're meeting those laws and regulations. So it's really building that end-to-end process to enable compliance.
And most folks wouldn't embark on such a journey without an implementation partner. Can you talk about what you looked for in a partner and what Edgile did for you?
Sure. We wanted to work with people that we knew and that we trusted. I mean, we've all worked with the Big Four and large system integrators. I think for many of the people on my team, including myself, have actually been members of those teams in the past. So we wanted a partner that could handle the depth and complexity of our needs. They had senior talent who were able to understand and operationalize the types of solutions that we really needed to enable our business. And we wanted a partner that was able to give us guidance, but still listening to our unique needs and helping us figure out how to configure the tool so it was going to work best for us. We got all of that. So we have management consulting. We've got the technical side. We've got a great team with Edgile. It was hands down a great decision. It's been a great partnership over the past few months. with their focus on three things, Microsoft Cloud Security, Identity and Access Management, as well as the GRC. And we've been able to use their resources across the spectrum, and really it not only helps our ServiceNow GRC initiative because they're connected to peers, but they understand collectively what we are trying to achieve as an information security department and really take this one piece and elevate it to our program level and connect the dots across everything.
Oh, that's great to hear. I'd like to ask a question to David from Edgile. From Edgile's perspective, what are some of the lessons you've learned from delivering GRC solutions to clients?
Thanks, Barbara. We have a great team at Edgile, and they've been doing this a long time. Nearly 20 years ago, we learned a very valuable lesson about audience-specific reporting. Our clients need to answer hard questions, and if you don't build the system with that front and center, you can't always get the answers that management needs. Or worse, you end up oversharing. So we start with reporting, and then we have pre-built content to make sure that our clients can get a truly integrated risk and compliance perspective. I know, Brian, you've had similar experiences and lessons learned. Can you talk about the importance of executive involvement and getting buy-in at the ground level, top down and bottom up?
Sure, David. We strive to deliver high value and challenge ourselves to make sure our client stakeholders are getting the right visibility at the C-suite and board level. So we like to deliver a solid quick win through our risk register approach that gives management risk intelligence and empowers them to be more comfortable in their decision-making and prioritization. A lot of this actually comes from our iGRC content as a quick accelerator, and we're talking arguably a couple of weeks, Greg, if you remember, that we're able to take that content and quickly work with leadership from your team to help stand up that IT risk register. We also know that without the buy-in and support from the troops, the solution won't be embraced. So in addition to broad stakeholder input, we also emphasize training of the various end users and management teams to make sure that we're giving them a clear picture of what is coming and what is in it for them. You know, a lot of folks are sitting there worrying about new technology, changes, impacts to their job day to day. So we need to make sure that they're on that journey as well so that they're fully embracing and are part of the movement towards automation and leveraging technology as part of their job. One of the last things that we do as well is make sure that we're providing post-go-live support to make sure that everyone is comfortable that if they need help or want changes, once the system is actually live or in the field, we can do that and won't be issuing change orders or things like that in delays. We find that it's really once the rubber hits the road, people start realizing, oh, I wish I had this, I wish I had that. So we really want to make sure that it's a positive user experience, and so we always bake in some level of that post-production support. So it's not just we're live and then bye. We give everyone that chance to really making sure that they get through a full cycle of whatever has been implemented.
And many organizations need to prove an ROI, at least frame their purchase decisions around an ROI. Is there an ROI story with GRC?
Well, actually, Barbara, I'd love to actually turn these last couple of questions around to you from a ServiceNow perspective. So what advice would ServiceNow have to all healthcare organizations around the GRC solution?
You know, in my opinion, GRC historically has been this huge burden that creates a lot of work for everyone. And once that work is done, there's no real visibility into what things have changed. Whether you're bound by HIPAA, PII, PCI, a lot of these regulations require the same things. They require better security posture and processes around incident response, vulnerability, change management, and even asset management. With ServiceNow, we do these things all on the platform, and we help reduce GRC burdens while providing that near real-time visibility in compliance and risk posture through continuous monitoring. So I would say, when you're looking at that ROI, you can understand both the hard and soft benefits you get from ServiceNow, as well as that reduction in spend in that time spent, which equates to a force multiplier and ultimately high dollar savings. Also, the quality and consistency provides that indirect cost savings by way of common risk language and management, trusting that data and the signals they provide. And lastly, I'd say that a lot of organizations find that they have multiple tools that perhaps can be consolidated on ServiceNow. And finally, ServiceNow does have an ROI calculator that can help build business cases as well. And just really briefly, when we look at the ServiceNow platform, we have this platform, this wonderful cloud solution that has elements like a single repository, service-aware CMDB, workflow, service portal, knowledge base, notifications, analytics. And then on top of this great, robust platform, the GRC portfolio is made up of 4 applications. That's policy and compliance management, audit management, risk management, and vendor risk management as well. So, Greg, maybe you have some pro tips for anyone that's considering going live.
Yeah, so it's never easy to build and get a new application out in the environment, but I think, from the get-go, number one is make sure that you have leadership involvement and buy-in. So be it my boss and my boss's boss and my boss's boss's boss, all the way up to the top. Really, we talked obviously the risk register and the reporting to the board, and this is something that was important to them. And I think you kind of alluded to this at the beginning of the conversation, was that our board is finally able to understand our risk posture and how our risk investments are paying off now. And having that buy-in and that need and that ask from them really helped us kind of get this moving and off the ground. Secondly, so I think it's important that we involve our internal ServiceNow team that manages our environment. Having their buy-in, their support, their guidance, and working with us so that we're able to truly partner and not struggle along and kind of have those political discussions around who owns what and how we should do it, but really being, working hand in hand and making sure that we're making those true steps together and they understand our end goals, how we, what our end state is, and how they can help support us to get there so that we are truly a partnership. And the third thing, have a place to keep track of those ideas. As Brian said, things come up during the project. I wish I could do this and I wish I could do that. And they're always going to happen, and they still are today. And so, it's having a place to really keep track of those ideas, figure out how they fit within that roadmap, and, making sure that roadmap isn't set in stone, but kind of making sure you're adjusting it and finding space to add in those great ideas, how you're going to get that bang for the buck when they come up.
And Greg, I think one of the things you did well, if I think about the integrated teams aspect, is if you think about the 3 solution areas that we help you deliver around the IT risk register, around the controls, as well as third-party risk, and you actually had some of your direct report team members accountable and responsible for owning, pieces of that. So you actually a lot of times weren't the one in the room making the decisions. You had your team members being responsible and accountable for those. And although they might have tried to come up with new ideas and expand the scope, if you will, that's where we would have that honest discussion about how do we get those on a roadmap or a post-production support sprint. So I think that worked quite well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the team understands the day-to-day workings of what they need. We can talk about it from a higher level perspective and a strategic outlook, but actually having the team that has to deliver on the day-to-day needs, and they truly understand what isn't working and what could work better, that input and really that ownership, it helps enable the project, but it also gets that buy-in and the support from the team themselves.
So where are you going next? And maybe you can share what's on the roadmap with Banner.
Sure. So regulatory change management is obviously a big deal in healthcare. It's how we're keeping up with the new laws, the new policies, as administrations change and Congress comes in for a new term and decides they want to do something different year after year after year. So we've teamed up with Edgile to build a regulatory change management solution. that really takes that problem and it solves it end to end. We're also looking at improving our risk intelligence with KPIs and KRIs. So we'll be further exploiting the prior IT service management and security operations investments that Banner made in ServiceNow, using that data, integrating everything to make sure that we truly have the metrics and we're able to quantify what we're doing and what we need to do next. We're also automating some of our really time-consuming manual processes in ServiceNow. We're going to be integrating the semantic DLP tool, and we're building a closed-loop process to better manage our unstructured EPHI, understanding where that data sits in the environment, what it's being used for, and really the risk management around that. And then lastly, we're getting some of our other assurance teams on board, and we're helping to improve our compliance readiness.
And perhaps we can hear from Edgile. What do you recommend that folks start on this journey? Perhaps what provides the most value?
Absolutely, Barbara. And I think back to my accounting and information security days back in university, where it was kind of ingrained in my head. It's about your structure and strategy. It's about your data, but then ultimately about your reporting. So you think about the accountant in me. It's about really what do you want to get out of the system that you're implementing. So we start with that strategy and a vision, but we quickly move to model the reporting that you're looking to get out of any implementation and transformation that you're doing. So how do we get some high visibility wins with senior leadership, like the C-suite and the board? This really helps us get management excited around the journey ahead of us towards operationalizing their processes within ServiceNow. So that's really a lot of what we do around the strategic approach, strategy, and reporting. David, do you want to speak to a minute on the tactical approach on where to start?
Thanks, Brian. The nice thing about ServiceNow is that you can really start anywhere. You don't need to have the CMDB in place and fully operationalized before you can start getting value from ServiceNow. I think that's one of the biggest misperceptions out there. Rather, as those capabilities come online, you can then wire them in to your GRC and audit and vendor risk solution and get a boost to those programs using that shared data repository and the broader enhanced insights that they give you. If you do have the luxury of starting greenfield without any legacy systems or processes in place, then we would recommend a path that starts with the integrated risk and compliance content to lay your foundation. What this does is it really tees up your regulatory change management while also setting the stage for your future KPI, KRI, and control testing automation, which ostensibly are a longer journey and a little bit more complicated to accomplish. We've also found that findings and remediations are a relatively safe place to start if the client has legacy processes that maybe haven't yet been aligned through those different siloed functions. So you can get tremendous value from a single source of truth around issues and corrective action plans, and you can avoid having to fight some of those political battles up front in order to get that quick win. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Barbara at ServiceNow to wrap up today's webinar. Barbara?
Oh, thank you. So if you haven't done so already, please feel free to enter a question in the Q&A box so we can have our team here to answer any questions. Also, just a reminder that there are a number of great resources, including a copy of this slide presentation available for you as well. So while we're waiting for people to enter in questions, I'm going to kind of kick off with the first question for Edgile. You shared the art of the possible and the Banner journey, but not all customers want the entire solution. How does this approach work then?
Thanks, Barbara. So the nice thing about the way that ServiceNow has been architected is while you're able to wire all these pieces together and get tremendous benefit from it, you are able to start really at anywhere in the stack. You can start with third-party risk management. You can start with risk registers. As I mentioned, you can also start quite simply with taking all of the legacy audit findings, regulatory exams, internal self-assessments, all the breach data and issues that you've got. And there's tremendous value in simply getting that in one place, being able to correlate and do trending. Tremendous value, and it helps you avoid having to get alignment on the risk processes, the risk methodology, and really helps you get started quickly.
Thank you. And Greg, one of the questions is how much out-of-the-box versus customization was used?
Yeah, so thinking back, I don't believe that we did any customization at all. I've mentioned configuration during this conversation. It's really kind of taking the ServiceNow tool, using its out-of-box capabilities, the workflows, the different aspects of the module that exist, and configuring them so that they use that language that we use internally, the terminology, building out those workflows so that they fit our processes and they show people where we are in that journey of each different item. It was a big thing for us not to use customization, just to make it overall easier to use the tool on a day-to-day basis, but also when the time came for platform upgrades, that we're not struggling trying to take our unique items and fit them into ServiceNow's upgraded platform to provide more capabilities. So, we've really tried to stay away from that where possible, and I think thus far we've done a great job at it.
And Greg, arguably, I know on the roadmap for 2019, we have the regulatory change management application that we're building. That currently, although isn't standard on the ServiceNow current platform, that's part of one of the roadmap items for the future release on ServiceNow. But we're taking what we're building for you, arguably using some of that standard out-of-the-box workflow, reporting type functionality, and going to be packaging that up and putting that on the ServiceNow marketplace and store, for folks to consume like you're going to be consuming very quickly as well.
Great. What are the management level risk categories that you're using?
So we worked with Edgile to build out our risk management framework, and I'll let Brian and David speak to this a little bit more. But really, we've worked together to put together a 6x26 level model that it takes kind of the 26 different risk categories and it rolls them up into that six category risk reporting elements. Then that goes to the board to help them speak on it. So it's things around identity management, it's things around configurations. David, not to put you on the spot here, can you speak a bit more to those 6 different elements?
Sure. So there's items like security and privacy. We're seeing a lot of activity in the privacy space, whether it's GDPR or the new laws coming out of California around that. There's, of course, operations, configuration, as you mentioned, identity and access management. You have policies and standards and the related governance pieces. And then there's the monitoring and reporting elements.
And I think one of the important things we had to do first early on was to really just align the terminology we were going to be using around risk methodologies and frameworks. So, we kind of, when we were going around meeting with folks from audit and privacy and legal, everyone had their own view of what high meant and low meant. And some were using a 3x3 or a 4x4. We ultimately, in this effort, tried to harmonize a 5x5 that we could then, publish and use kind of what that framework meant. So if we said something was medium or something was critical, we had a quick definition. Actually, there's 11x17 printed out placemats that are on most folks' desks right now that they're able to kind of calibrate what we mean when we say something is high or critical. And I think that was really important for us to being able to talk the same language as it relates to, the reporting coming out of that risk register.
Absolutely. I think the piece around that too is having that common definition, but also having that built into the back end of ServiceNow, really enabling our daily work so that, while it's great to have that 11 by 17 placemat on our desk, it's great to be able to have it so that it's, we're able to select the appropriate values and use that data in real time, and it's calculating overall risks for us and updating throughout the platform.
Great. And Greg, how was training conducted to the Banner stakeholders? Was it face-to-face, computer-based, or walkthrough?
Yeah, it was a bit of a combination of all of those, really. So, we did kind of a lunch and learn with our wider stakeholder groups to show them what the platform was. As I mentioned, we are using the IT service management and some of the security operations and various other pieces of the ServiceNow platform. So people understood kind of what the tool was, but to show them what the GRC is and how that works, how it helps us quantify risk and measure the impact of various different activities. We also worked with the Edgile team. They developed training materials for us and shared those with the teams that are in the day-to-day activities, but also they sat with the teams that are doing these day-to-day activities. We talked about hearing what those teams need, getting their ideas, but also making sure that as we build these and we configure these different pieces into the module, that they understand where to click, where to go, what they're searching for, and how to use that tool, how that workflow moves throughout the day of how their daily work is.
And then we also worked with your internal training team as well, who is responsible for kind of collecting and getting all the training materials into one place. So as your team continues to grow and you onboard new folks, how can you point people to this starter set of training that's part of an overall training program? It's important to integrate that into kind of your wider training initiatives.
Any advice for an organization currently in reactive issue management mode and who needs to get to proactive risk detection and remediation?
I think it really all starts with truly being able to quantify what those risks are specific to your organization and your industry. So we talked about kind of the regulatory change or the regulatory aspects and being able to harmonize the 100 different laws and regulations and frameworks. We took a half day to start working through those different risk statements that are applicable to Banner. Brian, David, myself, our CISO, and a few other members of our leadership team took that half-day investment and went and sat down to really truly talk through and have an honest conversation around what is the inherent risk of specific risk statements and what have we done up until today to truly reduce those risks and obviously arriving at our residual risk rating. With Edgile's IGRC content, it made it easy for us to understand what those different risk statements were and how it mapped to our organization. We were able to select, determine which of the different laws, frameworks, regulations applied to us. That kind of boiled down to the different risk statements, and then we were able to have that true view on risk to understand what it was that we were looking at.
Yeah, and one of the other things that Edgile's had the privilege of being a part of is working with clients that are, I'll say, in that whack-a-mole reactive mode where they're being pushed in directions that maybe aren't as strategic as they'd like to operate in. Being able to take some of the key stakeholders, whether it's IT, the business, audit, pulling them offline and being able to do some trending and analytics, doing some prioritization and understanding what some of those prerequisites are to give you the adequate runway to do it right the first time and really take a more strategic approach. You don't always have that luxury but we have seen it work successfully, and really it gives you a better pace to roll out these types of solutions.
Have you used the UCF data to help populate your regulatory risks and controls, or did Edgile bring their own methodology to risk and controls register?
So we have a methodology and framework for risk. We take not only a financial perspective. We looked at the client's consolidated financial reports. We worked with them to determine a materiality threshold as well as a risk tolerance threshold, and then dimensioned those impacts across, as I mentioned, financial, but then also operational, legal and regulatory, as well as health and human safety. And you then marry that up with then different likelihood thresholds around mean time between incident, and that very clear definition really helped the client have confidence in what their inherent and residual risk ratings were. Our content does come pre-populated with inherent risk ratings. They're a starting point, but all clients have to tailor that. And I think what makes this content really unique and in our opinion, extremely powerful and valuable is the fact that it truly is an integrated risk and compliance point of view. So it's not just laws and regulations, but what is the risk associated with each of those line items so that your management team is better empowered for decision makings and candidly risk trade-offs.
Okay. And Greg, what did the Edgile accelerators do for you considering the solution is out of the box?
Yeah, I mean, really having kind of that risk framework, we have multiple different risk approaches across different parts of our business. And so being able to leverage some of the risk framework and the definitions so that we're able to start having that conversation and get our information security as well as our IT teams aligned on what those definitions of risk are, landing on that kind of 5x5 heat map of where specific items fall and what that truly means to the business, the impact, as well as kind of building out the overall approach to risk management. We're a relatively immature organization from that perspective, and we've leveraged the ServiceNow platform with the Edgile accelerators to quickly get to a place where people can truly have an intelligent risk conversation today related to our information security and IT environments.
A lot of times when I think about out of the box, I'm thinking about the process, so the ability to grant users access and the workflow and the reporting and a lot of that stuff. And I think a lot of the accelerators that we would use, I would categorize as the content going in there. So you had your own policies and standards and your risk and control matrices. That was all Banner that you had. So we helped you get that into the tool itself. Edgile has starting points for those, should Banner not have been, on that journey already. But when it came to that risk content and the ability to build a risk register and map it back to those laws, regulations, frameworks, those could include things like HITRUST. If you're licensed to use HITRUST, HITRUST is part of that library that we would be able to map back to. NIST also is in there, all of those frameworks, if you will, as well as the laws like HIPAA, regs, et cetera, that you'd be able to tie those back to. So, where there's gaps in the content that an organization has, that's where we were able to fill those gaps, if you will, but also take your own.
And anecdotally, we heard here from the client that each of the teams have these 11 by 17 placemats with the risk framework laid out, and we heard a story from one of the teams about someone from the business wanted to do something with an application, and They sat down with that individual, had that placemat out in front, and said, let's understand what the risk is. And they were able to use that risk guide, and they self-identified that this was not a good decision and said, we don't want to do this. We're walking this back, and we better appreciate now the risk. And so that was quite powerful from our perspective.
Can you please expand on your automation steps in regards to what was automated and how you accomplished that automation?
Yeah, I mean, I think the automation really was using the workflows in the ServiceNow platform itself. And, rather than having someone have to send an email with a spreadsheet requesting data or directing someone to a SharePoint site just to collect information and then manually process it on the back end, ServiceNow is able to automatically advance things through workflows and direct it to the right teams so that they know when they have a new task or a new requested item to work through, rather than us having to continuously nudge via email. And also, things get lost in email. I always joke that my email is kind of a black hole. But ServiceNow really allows us to build that accountability so people see what's assigned to their name, what open items they have, what do we need from updating controls or from, quantifying our risks so that we're able to report to the right group, getting materials ready for our external auditors. It took it out of email and pushed into a platform that people had that visibility into.
And as part of the roadmap, Greg, I think we're going to leverage some more automation opportunities, and I think the semantic DLP EPHI integration is a great example of that, where we've actually, as part of another project, wrote a script in order to go quarantine some data. Well, that script is going to be integrated now into the ServiceNow process that we're building, to being able to move data, quarantine it, remediate, action on it, et cetera. So I think there's definitely some really good advanced opportunities to drive some automation. I think one of the things I think about is, when I think about risk, compliance, audit, et cetera, ServiceNow truly is really one of the only enterprise platforms that gives you the ability to work across all three lines of your risk and control lines of defense. Where a lot of times what you're seeing in these lines of defense, where your first line being your operations, performing day-to-day activities, they're arguably using, in a traditional and in kind of a non-ServiceNow model, a different tool than the second line, the monitoring function is using, that's arguably using a different tool than your third line, audit function is using. So now you have this ability to really have your first, second, and third lines of defense sharing a common platform. So the data that you're able to use and to being able to share quite quickly and leverage, should make your activities in the second and third line much easier. So if you're doing all your change management and user access, and there's tickets, and that process is in part of your operations in ServiceNow, your monitoring and audit functions related to those pieces should be much easier because the data is there already, and you should be able to streamline that process.
And Greg, do you use the GRC platform to manage an external audit like a Big Four into your organization? We do,
and so this is actually going to be our first year using that. That was kind of the audit management portion that we built out right away. In the past, we were using a shared drive for our control owners and operators to upload their evidence to for our continuous monitoring activities. Edgile worked with my team to understand what their process was and really leverage the ServiceNow platform out of the box. We talked about we had some creative ways of automating our control narratives and continuous monitoring on the platform. And again, that used the ServiceNow out of the box, but it was configuring it to meet our specific needs to really help automate that process. It provides that repository of when our auditors come and ask for specific information around our IT general controls, we're able to point them into ServiceNow rather than having to send them zip files or give them access to SharePoint that would require them to have VPN access, et cetera. It really just enables easy kind of a self-service external audit that takes some of the burden off of our control owners and operators. It allows them to continue doing their day-to-day work that they have to do to keep the lights on, but it also allows them to not be slammed when the auditors are here asking questions, usually at the busiest times of the year or when people are out on vacations and during the holidays.
Thank you. And maybe you can expand a little bit more on how Banner created policies and controls and how they were implemented.
Sure. Yeah. So we align our program with the NIST CSF, and so our policies were really built kind of with NIST as the foundation, but also taking into account our regulatory requirements. So that was the foundation of where we started. The control framework came from our risk and control matrix, as well as really kind of looking at what those different requirements were within our policies. And then there was a bit of a gap analysis as well, using the IGRC content to make sure that we had all those regulatory requirements tied off within our policies and controls environment.
Well, great. Well, I know we're coming up to the end of the hour. I just wanted to remind everyone on the call, if you have any other questions, please feel free to enter them in the box. And then also invite you to come hear more about the ServiceNow GRC solutions at our Knowledge event. So this year, Knowledge 19 is May 5th through the 9th. In the Venetian Las Vegas Sands Convention Center in Las Vegas. So a lot of great stories from other customers. In fact, of all the presentations that are held at Knowledge, I've heard a number like over 85 to 90% of those presentations are actually customers talking about their experiences with ServiceNow. So what a great way to connect, as well as connecting in our community. And as we showed before, if you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to Brian or David on the Edgile team, and here are some other additional links as well. Well, thank you everyone for participating. I hope that you found this very interesting and rewarding, and special thanks to Greg, Brian, and David, our guests today, for our webinar. Have a great day. Thank you.